In this video, we're going to be talking about the last principle that governs how people make decisions, and this is by far, I think, the most interesting out of all. So this principle suggests that people respond to incentives, and who knows this best other than students. Anytime in the past I've given an extra credit opportunity, I see so many students doing or taking that more seriously than the homework sometimes. So people do respond to incentives or even disincentives. But first, let's get started by thinking about what do we mean by an incentive. Okay, so an incentive can be thought of as any prospect of a reward or a punishment that induces a person to act. Okay, and so we already know from the previous principles that rational people make decisions by comparing costs and benefits at the margin. They must also respond to incentives. Okay, so to just highlight this more, incentives and disincentives play a huge role in policy making. And I'll send you some examples of where this has been really transformative. But let's take some simple examples of where we've seen prices maybe playing a very big role in people responding to incentives and some laws that may have changed people's behaviors. So we'll take three examples here. One is with gas prices. So any tax on gasoline, for example, encourages people to drive. So if you have a tax on gas prices, right? So maybe there's a higher tax on gas prices and that's increasing. So this would encourage people to drive smaller cars or electric cars or hybrid cars, for instance, or more fuel efficient cars. Okay, this is one reason why people drive smaller cars in Europe, where gasoline taxes are higher than those in the United States. A higher gasoline tax also encourages people to carpool or take public transportation or live closer to where they work. Okay, so other than smaller cars, there are also other decisions like where do you live, what mode of transport you use, etc. Okay. Another example is with what we see with cigarette taxes. So as cigarette taxes rise, we see that teen smoking falls. I can't remember what it was, but recently there was something with vaping, and as there is a tax on vaping, or there are laws that prohibit vaping around campuses, you would see that teen smoking would fall. Okay, so there are incentives and there are disincentives, but the idea here is just to get people to respond to those laws or those price changes. The other example is with seatbelt laws, and this is an interesting one, where seatbelt laws, which weren't there 60 years ago, were put into place, and seatbelt laws really altered drivers' cost-benefit calculations. So seatbelts make accidents less costly because they reduce the likelihood right? The or like the probability of injury or death, or I should say driver injury or death, is lowered, and seatbelts make the benefits of slow or careful driving also less. Okay, so people will drive faster because they think they're wearing seatbelts and maybe less carefully, which leads to a larger number of accidents. Okay, so I'm not just making this up. There was actually a study in 1975 by Sam Peltzman that concluded that there is little change in the number of driver deaths, but an increase in the number of pedestrian deaths. So, little change in driver deaths, but increase in pedestrian deaths. And just because of the seatbelt laws. So this was another analysis of auto safety, and is a controversial example of how the general principle that people respond to incentives work.